Tonight, we are going to do something a little unusual. We are not going to try to quiet the mind. If you have come here because the thinking will not stop, you already know how the trying goes. You have counted. You have breathed slowly and carefully. You have told yourself, in a firm and reasonable voice, that there is nothing to be solved at this hour, that everything waiting for you will still be waiting in the morning, and that the sensible thing now is to sleep. And the mind has listened to all of it, and agreed with all of it, and then gone right on thinking. So tonight we will take the old away, not silencing, settling. There is a difference between those two words, and these next few hours rest entirely upon it. Silencing is something you do to the mind. Settling is something the mind does by itself. The way mud stirred up through a glass of water sinks slowly to the bottom the moment you set the glass down and leave it alone. You do not settle the mud. You cannot reach in and press it down. You simply stop moving the glass, and time and stillness do the rest without you. That is the whole teaching of this evening, and if you fall asleep in the next 10 minutes, you will have taken the best part of it with you. Before we begin, if you would like, feel free to share what time it is where you are and what the night sounds like outside your window. And if you would like to carry these quiet hours with you into other rooms and other journeys, this channel is also on Spotify, and the link is waiting in the description below. Nothing to do now, of course. It will keep until morning. You do not need to know anything about Buddhism to be here. You do not need to remember a single word of what is said tonight. There will be stories, and there will be old teachings, and there will be long, slow stretches where nothing much happens at all, and none of it is a test. Let it all wash over you. If your attention drifts away in the middle of a sentence and comes back 3 chapters later, that is not a failure. That is exactly the shape of a mind falling asleep, and it is welcome here. So wherever you are lying, let yourself settle in. Let the weight of your body be fully given to whatever is holding it. The mattress, the pillow, the blanket over your legs. Let your shoulders come down away from your ears. Let your jaw loosen, and the space between your eyebrows soften, and your hands rest wherever they have fallen, open or closed. It does not matter. Take one slow breath in through the nose, and let it go out again without managing it. And now let us begin. Here is the first thing. And it is a strange thing to hear when you are exhausted and awake. The effort to stop thinking is itself more thinking. It comes dressed differently, so it is easy to miss. Ordinary thoughts wear the clothes of the day. The message you should have answered, the thing you said in a meeting that landed oddly, the money, the appointment, the person you miss. But the thought that says stop thinking is wearing robes. It sounds spiritual. It sounds like the solution. And it is doing exactly what all the others are doing, rising up in the mind, taking hold, and asking you to follow it somewhere. So when you lie in the dark and think, why won't my mind be quiet? Notice what has just happened. The mind has not gone quiet. It has simply started thinking about quiet. And then, a moment later, it starts thinking about how badly it is doing at thinking about quiet, and then about how long you have been awake, and how tired you will be tomorrow, and how this always happens, and how other people seem to fall asleep as easily as setting down a cup. Layer upon layer, all of it built on the sincere, exhausting wish to be free of the first layer. The Buddhist tradition noticed this a very long time ago One of the oldest collections of the Buddha's sayings, the Dhammapada, opens by putting the mind first in everything, that all we are arises with what we think, that the mind runs ahead of us and everything else follows behind. It is not said as a warning. It is said the way you might tell a traveller which way the river runs, so they can stop swimming against it. Because here is the part that goes missing when the teaching is repeated too quickly. If the mind leads everything, then the mind cannot be beaten into stillness by the mind. There is no second, quieter mind standing behind the first one with a hand raised, ready to give the order. There is only this one, and when it decides to force itself into silence, it is a wave trying to flatten the sea. The Zen teachers were very direct about this in the way that Zen tends to be. They did not tell students to have no thoughts. They told them to stop feeding the fight. Let us explore a story about this. There is a kind of story the tradition loves to tell about a young person arriving somewhere with a great deal of determination, and the years it takes for that determination to soften into something more useful. Let us tell one of those tonight. There was, long ago, a young man who walked for 11 days into the mountains to reach a small temple he had heard about from a merchant. The temple was nothing much to look at when he finally saw it. A low wooden hall with a mossy roof, a courtyard of packed earth, a single crooked pine, and beyond it the sound of water moving over stones. An old monk was in the courtyard with a broom made of bound twigs, sweeping pine needles into a small brown pile, and he did not stop sweeping when the young man arrived. The young man bowed and said that he had come to learn to still his mind. He said it very seriously. He explained, a mind that never stopped, that turned over words spoken to him years ago, that rehearsed conversations that had not happened yet, that woke him at the darkest part of the night and would not let him go back down. He wanted to be rid of it. He said he was willing to do anything. The old monk looked at the pile of needles for a while. Then he said, "You may stay. Sit in the hall each evening until the mind is quiet." The young man was delighted. Here at last was a clear instruction, given by someone who knew. He went into the hall that evening and sat down on a straw mat facing the wall, and he set about it the way he had set about everything else in his life, completely and with all his strength. The first night was terrible. Every thought he had ever had seemed to arrive at once, as though word had gone round that a door was open. He gritted his teeth and pushed them back. When one slipped past, he caught it and shoved it out and started again. By the time the bell sounded, he was damp with sweat and his shoulders ached and his heart was beating as though he had been climbing. The second night was worse. Weeks went by like this. He grew thinner. He began to dread the sound of the evening bell, and then he began to dread the dread. And what troubled him most was that outside the hall, sweeping the yard or carrying water up from the stream in 2 wooden buckets on a shoulder pole, he sometimes noticed that whole stretches of time had passed without any trouble at all. The cold ring of the bucket handle, the give of the mud, the smell of wood smoke coming down through the trees. It was only when he sat down to be quiet that the noise came roaring in like weather down a valley. At last, one grey afternoon with rain hanging in the pines, he found the old monk mending a sandal on the step of the hall, and he could not hold it in any longer. "I have been sitting for 2 months," he said. "It is not working. My mind is louder now than when I came. I think I am doing it wrong. and I would like you to tell me how to do it right." The old monk turned the sandal over and looked at the worn place in the sole. "How are you sitting?" he asked. "I am pushing the thoughts away," said the young man. "As soon as one comes, I push. When it comes back, I push harder. I do not let them in." "Ah," said the old monk. And then he said nothing at all for what felt like a very long time, and the rain came down a little heavier on the roof, and the young man stood there and let his hands hang at his sides. Then the old monk said, "There is a village down in the valley. When a traveller comes to the gate, what does the gatekeeper do? He lets them in. Does he go with them into every house? Does he follow them to the market and stand behind them while they buy fish and walk them home again?" "No," said the young man. "He stays at the gate." "And is the gate quieter because he is chasing people down the road?" The young man opened his mouth and then closed it again. "Tonight," said the old monk, "do not try to stop anything. Sit down. Let the thoughts come in through the gate. Let them go out again. You are not the wall. You are the one sitting near it, watching people pass, doing nothing about any of it." The young man went into the hall that evening feeling almost cheated. It sounded like permission to give up. He sat down facing the wall and he waited, arms folded in his sleeves, half expecting the whole thing to fall apart. The thoughts came, of course, all the usual ones: the conversation with his brother, the debt his family carried, the absurd suspicion that he was wasting his life in a mountain hut sweeping needles. And each time one arrived, out of long habit, his hands tensed to push, and each time he remembered and let his hands soften instead, and let the thought stand there in the doorway of him for as long as it wanted. Nothing dramatic happened. That is worth saying plainly, because we have been trained to expect a moment. There was no white light and no great emptiness. He simply noticed, some way into the evening, that he had stopped sweating, that his shoulders had come down, that the noise was still there, all of it, and yet it had somehow moved further off, the way voices in the next room move further off when you stop straining to hear the words. And at some point, without noticing the moment it happened, there was a long, quiet stretch where there was only the sound of the rain on the roof and the smell of wet pine coming in under the door. Then a thought about his brother arrived again, and he let it in, and it wandered through and left, and there was rain on the roof again. He stayed at that temple for many years. He did not become a man without thoughts. He became a man who did not fight them, which turned out, in the end, to be the quieter of the two lives by far. Come back now, gently, to your own room, to the weight of your head on the pillow, to the small sounds the building makes at this hour. You have been the young man in the hall. Most of us have, and most of us still are, night after night. There is a particular exhaustion in it that other people do not always see. The exhaustion of a person who has been working hard at rest. Notice how reasonable the fight feels. The mind is loud, and loudness is unpleasant, and unpleasant things ought to be dealt with. That is how everything else in your life works. If the tap drips, you fix the tap. If the room is cold, you close the window. It is a good instinct, and it has served you well in daylight. It simply does not work here, because in here the hand that grabs and the thing being grabbed are made of the same material. So the teaching is not try harder. It is not even try in a different way. It is something much stranger and much kinder. You may stop. You may stop pushing. You may let the thought about tomorrow finish itself and drift on. You may let the memory arrive and stand there in the doorway of you, unwelcomed and unresisted, and go out again on its own, because that is what thoughts do when nobody argues with them. They come in, they go out. Only the ones we chase down the road ever really stay. And if the pushing starts again, if you catch your jaw tightening in the dark, or your hands making small fists under the blanket, that is not a failure either. That is just the old habit doing what habits do. Notice it. Let the hands open. Begin again with nothing to begin. The door is open. The breath is moving. There is nothing to solve, nothing to reach for, nothing to fix. Let us rest here for a little while. There is nowhere else to be at this hour. Let your body be heavy. Let the air come in and let it go. And let the going out be longer and softer than the coming in, without making it so. If a thought is passing through the room right now, let it pass. It is only weather. When you are ready, we will go on together. Because there is something underneath all of this that we have not yet named. The young man in the hall suffered twice, once from the noise and once from his war with the noise. And that second suffering, the one we build ourselves, has an old and very precise name in this tradition. It is worth spending a slow hour with. Let us turn to it now. That second suffering, the war with the noise rather than the noise itself, was described by the Buddha with an image so simple that it has survived 25 centuries almost unchanged. He spoke of 2 arrows. The first arrow is the one that comes from outside, or from somewhere in us we did not choose. A thought arrives, a memory surfaces, the body aches, or the day was hard, or a small sharp worry lifts its head at 1 in the morning, the way small sharp worries do. You did not send for it. Nobody sends for it. It simply arrives, the way rain arrives, and it stings. The second arrow is the one we fire into ourselves afterward. It is the thought about the thought. Why am I like this? Why can't I let it go? I should be asleep by now. I ruin tomorrow. There is something wrong with me that other people do not have. And that arrow, the tradition says, is the one arrow, and then struck by a second arrow in the very same spot, feels the pain of 1 arrow or of 2. 2, of course. That is not a riddle. And then he said that this is what an untrained mind does to itself. Feels the first pain, and then adds the whole weight of resistance and sorrow and complaint on top of it, so that 1 wound becomes 2. The trained mind, he said, still feels the first arrow. That is the part people miss. Nothing in this teaching promises you a life where nothing stings. You will still lie down at the end of a long day and feel your mind start up like a mill wheel. What changes is that you stop reaching for the second arrow, and when you stop, something remarkable happens, though it takes a while to notice. The first pain, left alone, does not stay very long. It was never the thing that kept you awake. It was the arguing. Let us sit with this for a while, through a story. In a town at the mouth of a valley, there was a weaver, an old woman with hands like dry paper, and she took in an apprentice, a young woman from a farm 3 days' walk away, who had begged for the position and who wanted, more than she wanted anything, to be good at this. The old weaver's cloth was known in 4 towns, It was not decorated, and it was not clever. It was simply even. You could run your hand across a bolt of it in poor light and feel nothing at all. No ridge, no gathering, no place where the tension had wandered. People said she must have some trick. The apprentice learned quickly. Within a season, she could dress a loom on her own, and by the end of the year, she was weaving lengths that the old woman sold without comment, which was the highest praise available in that house. And then, one winter evening, with the lamps lit and the shutters closed and sleet ticking against the wood, her thread broke. It was not a disaster. Threads break. Every weaver alive has spliced a broken warp thread by feel in bad light, and the apprentice knew how. She had done it 100 times. But this thread broke because she had rushed the tension in the morning, and she knew that too, the instant it went. She sat back on the bench and looked at the loom, and something in her chest went hard and cold. She did not fix it that night. She sat there while the sleet came down, and she took herself apart. She thought about the morning, and what she had done wrong, and how obvious it should have been. She thought about the last 3 lengths, and wondered whether they had been rushed too, and whether anyone had noticed and simply been kind. She thought about the farm, and how her mother had said this would happen. By the time she finally went up to her bed, the fire was out, and her feet were numb, and she had not repaired a single thread. She lay awake most of that night, and in the morning her eyes were red, and her hands were unsteady, and she rushed again, and by midday another thread had gone. The old woman said nothing for 2 days. She was not the sort to arrive with a lesson while the sleet was still falling. But on the 3rd evening, she came and sat on the end of the bench and looked at the loom for a while and then said, "Show me your hands." The apprentice held them out. They were shaking very slightly. When the thread went, the old woman said, "How long did it take you to mend it?" "I did not mend it that night." "How long did it take when you did?" The apprentice thought. "The length of a breath, perhaps 2. And the rest of the night?" The apprentice did not answer. The old woman reached out and pinched a strand of the warp between her thumb and finger and plucked it, and they both listened to the small, dull note it made. "There are 2 breakages," she said. "The one in the cloth, and the one you carry upstairs. The first is a thread. It takes a breath to mend, and then it is gone, and the cloth does not remember it. The second has no thread in it at all, and you can work at it all night, and in the morning there will be more of it than when you began." She let go of the warp. "I have woven for 51 years. I break threads. I broke one this afternoon, and you did not hear about it because I mended it and went on." "How do you not think about it afterward?" said the apprentice. "Oh, I think about it," said the old woman. "The thought comes, I am not made of stone." She stood up slowly, one hand on the frame. "I simply do not sit down with it and give it supper." She paused at the foot of the stairs with the lamp in her hand, and the sleet went on ticking against the shutters. The thought is a guest at the door. Whether it stays the night is not up to the guest. The apprentice sat with the loom a long while after the old woman had gone up, and then she leaned in and found the broken end and mended it by feel in poor light, the length of 2 breaths, and put out the lamp. "Come back now to your own room, to the dark and the weight of the blanket, and the slow, simple fact of your breathing going on without you. You know both of those breakages. Everyone lying awake tonight knows both of them. The first arrow tonight might have been very small. A sentence you replayed, a thing left undone, the particular late-night arrival of a worry that would be a 5-minute problem at noon and is somehow an enormous one at 2 in the morning. That is the thread. It happened. It stung. And then the second arrow, the long night of it, the commentary, the verdict on yourself for still being awake, the counting of the hours you have left before the alarm, which is a form of the second arrow so common that most people do not recognize it as one at all. None of that came from the first thought. All of it came from the bow in your own hands. And notice how the second arrow always wears the face of usefulness. It never announces itself as cruelty. It says it is being responsible. It says that if you go over the thing once more, you might find the answer. That if you are hard enough on yourself now, you will not make the mistake again. That the worrying is a kind of care. That is why it is so difficult to put down. It has convinced you it is working, but you have lain awake enough nights to know the truth of it. Nothing was solved at 3 in the morning. Nothing has ever been solved at 3 in the morning. The mind at that hour is not a workshop. It is an echoing room, and everything you say into it comes back larger and darker than it went in, and none of it survives contact with daylight. So let us do the very ordinary thing the old woman did. Not the impressive thing, not the enlightened thing, the ordinary thing. Let the first arrow be. It is here. It stings a little. That is allowed. You are permitted to be a person lying in the dark with an unquiet mind and no verdict attached to it at all. And when the second arrow starts to lift, when you hear the voice beginning, "Why am I still awake? This is going to ruin tomorrow. What is wrong with me?" You do not have to fight it either. You simply do not sit down with it and give it supper. Let it stand in the doorway, unfed, and see how long it stays. There is nothing wrong with you. A mind that runs at night is not a broken mind. It is a mind that has been given a great deal to carry and has not yet been told it can set the load down at the door. It will learn, not tonight, and not because you made it, slowly, over many nights, the way a path appears across a field, because people keep walking the same soft line. There is one more place the second arrow likes to hide, and it is worth naming plainly, because almost everyone lying awake tonight has fired it at least once already. It is the clock on the shelf. You know the movement, the turning of the head, the reaching for the phone, or the glance at the small glowing numbers on the shelf, and then the arithmetic that follows as surely as thunder follows lightning. 4 hours and 20 minutes, 3 hours and 50. The arithmetic is never neutral. It always arrives with a small verdict attached, that this is not enough, that tomorrow is already damaged, that the night has become a thing you are losing rather than a thing you are resting inside. Notice that the tiredness in your body did not change when you looked. Nothing in your muscles or your breathing was altered by the number. Only the story changed. Before the glance, you were a person lying warm in the dark. After it, you were a person running out of time. That is a whole second arrow, fired in less than a second, for no reason but habit. So let the clock keep its own counsel tonight. It will go on counting whether you watch it or not, and it does not need your help, and you will find out what the hour is soon enough in the ordinary way when the light comes. And what remains, when you set down the arithmetic, is simply this: a body lying down in the dark, doing exactly what a body ought to be doing at this hour. Let us come into it for a moment, not to fix anything, just to visit, begin at the feet. Feel them where they are, under the blanket, warm or cool, one perhaps a little heavier than the other. There is nothing they need to do now. Let them be as heavy as they want to be. Come up through the ankles and the long bones of the shins. Let the calves let go. Let the knees be soft and unlocked. Feel the weight of your thighs pressing down into the bed, and the way the bed pushes gently back, holding all of it, asking nothing. Let the hips settle. Let the lower back spread out and widen the way something warm spreads on a warm surface. Feel the whole length of your spine supported from beneath, so there is no reason for a single muscle along it to hold on. Let the belly be soft. This is the place we spend the day quietly bracing without knowing it, and it is often the last place to be given permission. Give it permission now. Let the breath come down into it, and let it rise and fall on its own. Let the chest be easy. Let the shoulders drop back and down away from the ears, further than you think they can go. Let the arms be heavy, all the way out to the fingers, and let the fingers stay wherever they have fallen. Let the throat soften. Let the jaw come apart very slightly, so the teeth are not touching. Let the tongue rest low in the mouth. Let the small muscles around the eyes let go, and the forehead widen, and the space between the eyebrows become smooth and unbusy. And now the breath, without changing it. In and out. Perhaps a little longer on the way out, if that happens by itself. Nothing to manage. It has been breathing you all your life while you thought about other things. If a thought arrived during any of that, it is welcome. Perhaps several did. Perhaps you followed one for a while and came back somewhere near the shoulders. That is not a mistake. That is what the mind does. And coming back is not a punishment. It is just coming back. The first arrow lands. The bow stays down. The night goes on being a night, and eventually the night takes you. Let us pause here for a few breaths. There is nothing to solve and nowhere to push. Feel the air moving in and let it out slowly. Let your hands be open if they are not already. Let the whole day you have been carrying rest on the floor beside the bed, where you can find it in the morning, if you still want it then. When you are ready, we will go on. Because if we are not to fight the thoughts, and not to fire the second arrow at ourselves for having them, a fair question remains, and it is the question that keeps most people awake. Then what actually makes the mind clear? What settles it, if not us? The answer, in this tradition, is a glass of muddy water. Let us go and look at it. Picture the glass then, an ordinary one, on an ordinary table. Someone has filled it from a pond, and it is full of fine brown silt, and if you hold it up to a candle, you cannot see the flame through it at all. The water is not broken. There is nothing wrong with the glass. It is simply stirred. Now, how would you clear it? You cannot reach in and press the silt down. Your hand would only lift more of it. You cannot pour off the cloudiness, because the cloudiness is not floating on top. It is everywhere. You cannot argue with it. You cannot decide it. There is no technique available to you at all, in fact, except one, and it is the strangest technique in the world, because it consists entirely of not doing anything. You set the glass down, and you leave it alone, and then slowly, without any assistance from you, the heavy particles begin to drift toward the bottom. Not all at once, not in any order you could predict, but by morning the silt is a soft brown layer at the base of the glass, and the water above it is perfectly clear. And if you hold it up to a candle now, You will see the flame through it, steady and bright, and you will not be able to point to the moment it happened. This is the whole of tonight's teaching in a single image, and the tradition has used it for a very long time, because it says something that words alone tend to fumble. Clarity is not manufactured. Clarity is what is already there underneath when the stirring stops. Your mind is not cloudy because it is defective. Your mind is cloudy because it has been carried around all day and shaken. Conversations, screens, decisions, small collisions with other people, 100 little arrivals of news and noise, all of it stirred through you, hour after hour, and then, at 10 or 11 at night, you lay the whole shaken glass of it down on a pillow and wondered why you could not see through it. Of course you cannot see through it. It has not had time to settle, and the terrible irony, which you already know from the last 2 hours of your own life, is that every effort to hurry the settling is another hand going into the water. There is a kind of story the tradition loves to tell about this, and it goes something like this. 2 travelers were crossing a wide, dry country in the last part of the day. They had been walking since morning and their water had run out at noon, and the older one, who had made this crossing before, said there was a stream at the foot of the ridge and that they would drink there and camp. They came down to it as the light was going. It was a small stream, clear enough in ordinary times, but a herd of cattle had crossed it just above them not long before. They could see the churned bank and the deep cloven prints filling slowly with brown water. And where the travellers knelt, the stream was the colour of weak tea and full of drifting silt. The younger man was very thirsty. He filled his cup anyway and looked into it and could not bring himself to drink. He tipped it out. He walked upstream a little way and tried again. It was worse there. He came back down and knelt and stirred at the shallows with his hand, thinking perhaps to push the mud aside toward the bank. And of course, the water only clouded further, and now it clouded downstream as well, where it had begun to run a little clearer. He stood up. He was angry in the way that thirsty, tired people are angry, which is to say he was angry at everything and had decided to call it a problem with the stream. He said they should walk on. He said there would be another stream. He said this one was ruined. The older man had by then unrolled his blanket on a flat place above the bank and taken off his sandals and was sitting with his feet stretched out in front of him, looking at nothing in particular, listening to the water. "Sit down," he said. "I am thirsty." "I know. Sit down." The younger man sat down, mostly because his legs had stopped agreeing with him. The sun went behind the ridge. The heat came up out of the ground the way it does in dry country, and the first stars came out, and neither of them said anything at all for a long time. The younger man's anger, having nothing to push against, went quiet after a while, and then he was simply tired and sitting in the dark near the sound of moving water. Some time later, the older man got up, stiffly, and walked down to the stream, and knelt, and filled both cups without hurrying, and brought them back. The water was clear. The younger man drank the whole cup in one go, and then sat holding it, and finally said, "You did nothing." "I sat down," said the older man, "but the water cleared. The water always clears. It is what water does when it is left alone." He drank a little from his own cup. "The mud is heavy. It wants the bottom. You do not have to persuade it." The younger man lay back on the warm ground and looked up at the stars for a while. "I walked upstream," he said, I thought if I went far enough, I would find water that had not been touched. You would have, said the older man, in about 4 hours, and by then this would have cleared, and you would have been 4 hours away from it, and thirsty. They slept there. In the morning, the stream was running clean over pale stones, and the cattle prints in the bank had softened, and there was nothing left of the crisis of the evening before. Come back now, unhurriedly, to your own room, and to the sound of your own breathing. That story is not really about water, and you know it is not, because you have been the younger man at the bank of the stream for most of tonight. The mind that will not stop is a stirred mind, and stirred is a temporary condition, not a character flaw. Something today stirred it, perhaps something obvious, perhaps something so small you could not name it if you tried, and now the fine particles of it are drifting through everything you look at, and every attempt to clear the water by hand is putting your hand into the water. Notice, too, how much of the young man's suffering was made of the plan. He was going to walk on. He was going to find better water. He had a whole strategy, formed in the worst possible state of mind, and every part of it would have carried him away from the thing he wanted, which was sitting quietly at his feet the entire time and asking only to be left alone for an hour. Trying to think your way to a quiet mind is stirring. Analyzing why you cannot sleep is stirring. Deciding that you must relax within the next 10 minutes is stirring. Even the gentle-sounding version, I will simply observe my breath very carefully and correctly until stillness is achieved, can be stirring if there is a fist inside it. So what is left? What actually settles a mind, if not effort? Time and stillness and not being disturbed. That is all. It is almost insultingly simple, and it is the reason this recording is long and slow and going nowhere in particular. There is nothing here for you to achieve. There is only a voice in the dark and a story, and then another story, and the hours passing, and the silt going quietly down. You may have noticed something already, in fact. Somewhere in the last half hour, without deciding to, you probably stopped fighting for a while, perhaps only for a few minutes. Perhaps your attention drifted off into the mountains with the young man in the hall and came back somewhere in the middle of the weaver's kitchen, and you could not say what happened in between. That drifting is not a lapse in your practice. That drifting is the settling. That is precisely what it looks like from the inside. Not a triumph, not a bright, clear feeling of victory, just a slow forgetting to hold on. And when the mind rises up again, and it will several times before morning, you have not lost anything. The glass has been nudged, that is all. Set it down again. You will not need to do it well. It helps sometimes to see what did the stirring, not to analyze it. We are not opening anything tonight, only to acknowledge it, the way you might glance at a coat hanging by the door and know whose it is. So let us walk back through the day for a moment, lightly, the way you would walk through a house turning off lamps. There was the waking, whenever that was, and whatever the first thought of the morning happened to be. There was the getting up and the small business of becoming a person again. There was the first thing that asked something of you, and the second, and by then the water had begun to move. There were the people. Someone needed an answer. Someone was short with you, or you were short with someone, or a conversation ended half a step off from where you wanted it to end, and you carried the half step with you into the afternoon. There were the screens and the endless small arrivals. 100 sentences from 100 strangers, none of which you asked for, each one dropping into the water like a pebble. There were the things you did well today, which you have probably not mentioned to yourself once. There were the things left undone, which you have mentioned several times. And then, at some point, it grew dark, and you closed the door and lay down with all of it still turning. No wonder. Honestly, no wonder. Look at how much went into that glass. There is nothing mysterious about a mind that is still moving an hour after the day stopped. The only mysterious thing would be if it were not, and the settling keeps no schedule. This is worth knowing, because the wish to be asleep by a particular hour is itself a hand in the water. Some nights the silt goes down within minutes, and you never hear the end of the story. Some nights it takes hours, and drifts, and rises again when you turn over. The glass does not care. It is not measuring its progress, and it is not behind. You are not behind either. Lying awake and warm in the dark, doing nothing, is already rest. Not the deep kind yet, but real rest all the same, and it is quietly repairing you whether or not sleep has arrived. The night is long. There is time. There has always been time. Let us do it now together, without any effort at all. Feel the surface you are lying on and how completely it is holding you. You are not being asked to keep yourself up. Every muscle that has been quietly doing that job can hand it over now. Let the breath be exactly as it is. Do not deepen it. Do not slow it. Simply notice that it is happening, in and out, the way the stream went on running in the dark while the two men sat and said nothing. And then, gently, let even the noticing go loose. You do not have to watch your breath like a guard. You can let it move the way you would let a fire burn in the corner of a room, aware of it, warmed by it, not staring at it. If a thought is moving through, let it move. If several are, let them. Silt in water is not a moral failing. It is only silt, and it is on its way down whether you approve of it or not. There is nothing to solve. There is nothing to reach for. There is nothing to fix. The glass is on the table. The room is dark. The silt is going down at its own pace, in its own time, and it does not need to be watched to do it, any more than the stream needed the two men to watch it through the night. Heavy things find the bottom. That is simply what heavy things do in water and in minds, and it has been true for far longer than either of us has been awake. Let us rest here for a while. The glass is set down. The hands are out of the water. Nothing in this room requires your attention, and nothing in tomorrow can be reached from here, and so there is genuinely nothing for you to do, but lie still and let heavy things go where heavy things go. When you are ready, we will go on together, slowly, because there is one more thing hidden in that glass of water, and it is the thing that changes everything for a person who has spent years at war with their own thinking. When the silt has gone to the bottom, the silt has not left. It is still in the glass. Nothing was removed, nothing was defeated, nothing was cast out. And yet, the water is clear, which means the clarity was never the absence of the mud. Hold that for a moment, because it is worth carrying. The peace you are looking for tonight is not a mind with no thoughts in it. You could wait your whole life for that mind and never meet it. The peace is a mind where the thoughts have gone quiet at the bottom and stopped colouring everything, and where you can see through it again, the flame, the room, the ordinary evening, with all the silt still there and no longer in the way. And if that is true of water, we should ask what it looks like in the mind itself. What is the clear part? What is it that all the thoughts have been drifting through all night, unbothered and unstained, the way weather drifts through a sky without ever touching it? Let us go up then, out of the water and into the wide night air, and look at the sky for a while. The sky at this hour is doing what it always does, which is nothing at all. Somewhere above your roof there is a great deal of dark air and cloud moving through it in slow shapes you cannot see, and beyond that the stars, and none of it is aware of you, or of the hour, or of how long you have been lying here. If it is raining where you are, the sky is not troubled by the rain. If it is clear, the sky is not pleased about it. Weather happens inside the sky, and the sky is entirely unaffected, and that is not a poetic flourish. It is simply an accurate description of how the two things are arranged. This is the second image the tradition returns to again and again, and it goes one step further than the water did. The glass of muddy water showed us that clarity comes back on its own. The sky shows us something else, that the clear thing was never touched in the first place. Storms pass through it, whole seasons of storms. Nothing accumulates. There is no scarred place in the sky where last winter's weather happened, no residue, no wearing down. The rain falls out of it, and the rain ends, and there is only depth and openness again, exactly as before. And the teaching, quietly, is this: your thoughts are the weather, and you are not. Take a moment with that, because it is easy to nod at and hard to actually hear. All night you have been assuming that you are the thinking, that the anxious sentence at 1:30 is you being anxious, that the mind that will not stop is your mind, and therefore, somehow, your fault and your responsibility and your emergency. But watch what actually happens next time one arrives. The thought comes, and something is aware of it coming. Something notices it, and notices when it goes, and is still here afterward waiting for the next one. That noticing is not a thought. It has no shape and no argument and no urgency. It has been here the whole night, perfectly quiet, while the weather came through. And if you have been searching all evening for something still to hold on to, it is worth knowing that the still thing was never lost. It has been the thing doing the searching. The word the tradition uses for the passing part is anicca. It is usually translated as impermanence, which sounds cold and philosophical, but the older feeling of it is warmer and more practical. It means nothing that arises stays, not the beautiful things, which is why we grieve, and not the difficult things, which, at 1 a.m, is very good news indeed. The thought that is bothering you right now will not be here in 20 minutes. It may come back and go and come back again. But this one, in exactly this form, with exactly this weight, is already on its way out of the room as you listen to this sentence. You do not have to make it leave. It is leaving. That is what it is made of. Let us go and look at some clouds for a while. There was a village at the edge of high country where the summer grazing was up on the long bare hills, and the goats went up in the early summer and came down before the first snow, and the children took turns going up with them. It was not hard work. It was mostly sitting. One summer it was a girl of about 9 who went, with a wool blanket and a bag of dried apricots and a piece of bread wrapped in cloth, and a bad-tempered brown dog who did all of the actual goat-keeping, and who considered the girl an unnecessary addition to the operation. The first days were long. She had thought she would be lonely, and she was in the beginning. and there was nothing to look at up there. No trees, no houses, only grass going grey-green in the wind, and the folded shapes of further hills, and the enormous sky sitting over all of it, bigger than anything she had ever been under. So she started naming the clouds, because there was nothing else to do. That one was a fish. That one was a fish that had eaten another fish. That one was her uncle asleep in a chair. That one was a horse pulling a cart, and then the cart came loose and went off on its own, and then the horse's head came apart and became a bird, and she felt oddly sorry about it. She got very good at it. By the second week, she could tell you which clouds were going to last and which ones were coming apart already. She learned that the low, fast ones ran in a different direction from the high, slow ones, which she had never noticed in her whole life before, and which struck her as an important discovery worth telling someone about, though there was only the dog. She learned the ones that meant rain by evening, and she learned to be down at the shepherd's hut with the goats gathered when they came. And somewhere in the 4th or 5th week, lying on her back in the grass with her hands behind her head, the naming stopped. It was not a decision. She did not grow tired of the game. She simply noticed, some way into an afternoon, that she had been looking up for a long time without saying anything to herself about it, that there had been shapes moving across a great blue depth, and no fish, no uncle, no horse, just the moving and the depth behind it, and the sound of the wind coming over the ridge, and a bee somewhere near her ear. She felt very quiet. She lay there and let it go on. The clouds kept coming from behind the hill on her left, drifting across and going out over the far country on her right, and the space they were crossing did not move at all. She thought, and this was the closest she came to putting words on it, and she was 9, so the words were not sophisticated. The sky doesn't mind. That was all. The sky did not mind. Not the clouds, not the wind, not the coming rain, not the summer ending. It let all of it through and stayed exactly as it was. There was a day later that summer that she remembered longer than the rest. A storm came over, not a small one, the kind that turns the whole afternoon the colour of slate, that flattens the grass in waves and makes the goats crowd against the wall of the hut. She got them in and stood in the doorway with the dog pressed against her leg and watched it come across the hills toward her, dragging its grey skirts of rain, and she was frightened in the ordinary way a child is frightened by something enormous. It lasted perhaps an hour. The rain came sideways, and the thunder went off somewhere behind the ridge with a sound she felt in the wood of the door frame, and the light went strange and green, and she thought about her mother. And then it moved on, the way they do. She came out afterward into the wet grass. Everything was steaming slightly. The goats went back to their business, having entirely forgotten the whole affair. And she looked up, and there was the same sky she had been lying under all summer, washed, enormous, going gold at the edges where the sun had got underneath the last of the cloud, not shaken, not marked. There was no bruise in it where the storm had been. She stood in the wet grass a long time looking at that. She stayed on that hill until the light started to go, and then she whistled for the dog, who ignored her, and gathered the goats, who also ignored her, and went down. She was an old woman before she ever heard the word for what she had noticed that afternoon, and by then she had forgotten most of the summer. But she had a way all her life of going still in the middle of difficult things, which her family could not account for and which she never explained, because it was not really explainable. It was just that somewhere behind everything that was happening, she could feel a great deal of room, and the room was not upset. Come back now to your own dark room and to your own breathing, which has been going on all this time. You have been the sky all night without noticing it. Every thought that has come through you since you lay down has arrived in something. It arrived in awareness the way a cloud arrives in air, and when it left, and they have all left, every single one of them, or you would still be holding them all at once. The place it arrived in was not damaged. With weight, and they flatten the grass, and while they are overhead, it is genuinely difficult to believe they are passing, but you have watched 100 of them pass. Every storm you have ever had has ended, or you would not be lying here listening to a voice in the dark. The ones you were sure would never lift, lifted. The ones that took a season, and then the light got underneath the edge of them, and there was the sky again, unbruised. So when you say my mind won't stop, notice the strange grammar of it. There is the mind that will not stop, and there is the one who is aware that it will not stop, who is not stopping or starting, who is simply here. Two things. Only one of them is noisy, and it is not the one you are made of, and it is not the one that has been quietly listening to this voice for the last hour while the weather went by overhead. And you do not have to do anything with this. That is important, because the moment we hear something like this, we want to make it into a technique. I must remain identified with the sky. I must not become the clouds. And now we are stirring the water again, effortfully being the sky, which is a great deal of work for something that requires none. You are not being asked to become anything. You are being invited to notice what has already been the case all night, the room around the thinking, the quiet that the noise has been happening in. Let us feel it for a moment, in the simplest possible way. Notice a sound, any sound, the house settling, a car somewhere, the small hum a room makes when it is otherwise silent. Notice that you did not have to do anything to hear it. It arrived, and something in you received it, and if it stops, you will notice that too. Now notice the space the sound is happening in, not the sound, what surrounds it. And now, gently, notice the thoughts the same way, not their content. Never mind their content tonight. Just that they are arriving in something and moving through it and going. The way the girl's clouds crossed the blue and went out over the far country. The weather comes, the weather goes, the room stays. You may find, if you stay with this for a minute or two, that the thoughts do not stop, and that something has changed anyway. They are still arriving, but there is a little more air around them than there was. They are not pressed right up against your face anymore. That extra half-inch of room is not a small thing. It is very nearly everything, and it did not come from you defeating anything. And if none of that happens tonight, that is fine as well. The sky does not require you to notice it in order to go on being wide. Let us rest here for a few breaths. There is nothing to hold on to, and nothing you could lose. Nothing that has passed through you tonight has taken anything with it, and nothing that passes through in the next hour will either. The bed is holding you. The dark is holding the room. The night is holding all of it, and the night is in no hurry whatsoever. Let the shoulders be heavy. Let the breath go out long and slow, as though a window somewhere in the house has been opened. If a difficult thought passes through in the next few minutes, you might try one small thing, and only if it comes easily. Instead of arguing with it, simply let it be weather. Not good weather, not bad weather. Weather. It came from behind the hill on the left. It is going out over the far country on the right. You do not have to agree with it, and you do not have to argue with it, and you certainly do not have to solve it at this hour of the night. You only have to let it cross. When you are ready, we will go on together, because there is one honest objection to everything we have just said, and if you are still awake, you have probably already made it. It is all very well to say that thoughts pass through like clouds, but some thoughts do not pass. Some of them arrive and take you with them. You are 3 streets away, 5 years back, deep inside a conversation that has not happened yet, and you did not notice yourself leaving. Nobody watches those go by. You go with them. So the question that remains is a practical one, and it is not about the sky at all. It is about the moment. What happens in the small instant when a thought arrives and asks you to follow it out the door? We touched this early on at the temple gate. Let us go back and stand at that gate properly now, and meet the man who has kept it for 40 years. He was, by the end, the oldest man in that town, and he had kept the West Gate for something like 40 years. It was a small walled town on a trade road, the kind that had mattered a great deal 200 years earlier and had settled since into a comfortable unimportance. The wall was still there, and the gates were still shut at dusk, and opened at first light, more out of habit than fear, and a man sat in the small stone room beside the west arch, with a brazier and a ledger, and that man, for 40 years, was him. He had not been good at it in the beginning. That is the part of the story worth telling. When he first took the post, he was 19, and he understood the job to be about vigilance, and he had a great deal of vigilance available and nothing to spend it on. So he spent it on everyone. He questioned the carters. He questioned the pilgrims. He walked a little way down the road after a pair of men who had answered him too smoothly, and then a little further, and then found himself half a mile from the gate, standing in the dust, watching 2 entirely ordinary strangers get smaller. He came back at a run, sweating, furious with himself, and found the gate exactly as he had left it. The arch empty, the dust settling, an old woman waiting patiently with a basket of onions to be counted into the ledger. She looked at him for a moment and said nothing at all, which he found worse than anything she could have said. That was the pattern of his first years. Something would come through the arch and catch on him. A face he did not like, a story that did not sit right, a cart with a covered load. And off he would go, into speculation, into following, into elaborate imagined versions of what might be happening in the town, while he was not at the gate. He slept badly. He was thin. He was, by every measure he had, working extremely hard, and the town was no safer than it had ever been. That was the thing that eventually got through to him. Nothing he chased had ever turned out to be anything. Meanwhile, twice in those years, something had actually gone wrong at the gate itself, in the 10 minutes he had been elsewhere. The winter he turned 26, he was ill for a long stretch. A fever that came and went and left him weak enough that walking down the road was out of the question. They let him keep the post because there was no one else to give it to, and he sat in the stone room wrapped in everything he owned, and he did his job the only way his body would allow. He sat there, and he looked, and what he discovered that winter was so simple that he was almost angry about it. He saw more from the chair than he had ever seen from the road, because when you are not chasing anything, everything is visible. He noticed the pause a man made before answering. He noticed which carts rode low and which rode light. He noticed the woman who came through every 8th day and always in the afternoon, and the fact that she had recently begun coming in the morning, which turned out months later to matter. None of it was effort. It was simply what was left when the running stopped. He also discovered something about the running itself. Every single time he had left the gate, it had felt urgent. That was the trick of it. The thing that pulls you off your post never announces itself as a distraction. It announces itself as the most important thing happening, the one you would be negligent to ignore. And afterward, standing in the dust, it always turned out to be a man going to a village to see his sister. So he stopped going. For the next 30-odd years, he sat at the west gate and let the whole world walk past him. People misunderstood what he was doing, mostly. Children thought he was lazy, which he enjoyed. A young guard on the north gate once asked him, in the tone of a man expecting a secret, what his method was, how he decided whom to stop, how he read them, what he looked for. The old man thought about it for a while and said, "I stay where I am, and I let the road come to me." The young guard waited for the rest, and there was no rest, and he went away disappointed and told people the old man on the west gate had gone simple. But there was a little more to it, and he could have said it if he had thought anyone wanted it. It was this: he greeted everyone. Every traveller who came under that arch, he saw and acknowledged. A nod, a word, a look. He did not pretend they were not there, and he did not try to keep them out, and he did not go with them. He knew that the ones you refuse to look at are exactly the ones that get past you, and he knew that the ones you follow take you away from the only place you are any use. There is one night from those years that he told people about occasionally, when he was very old and less careful about being interesting. A man came through at dusk, just before the gate was closed. Nothing about him was right. He gave a name that did not match his accent, and he had no goods and no reason, and he looked at the ledger too long while the old man wrote in it. Every instinct the gatekeeper had was standing up and pointing down the road after him, and he stayed in the chair. He watched the man go up the main street and turn left toward the inn, and he noted the hour, and he closed the gate at dusk, as he did every night of his life, and he sat down again by the brazier. Nothing happened. Whatever the man was, whatever he had come for, he left again 2 days later by the north gate and was never heard of in that town again. The old man used to say that this was the hardest night he ever worked, and that he had done nothing at all, and that those two facts were not in contradiction. Anyone can sit still when the road is empty, he said. The post is only real when you badly want to leave it. He was still there at the end. They found him one morning sitting in the stone room with the brazier gone out and the ledger open, and the town buried him with more ceremony than a gatekeeper usually gets, and nobody could quite explain why the west gate felt different afterward. Come back now, gently, into your own room and your own bed and the small dark space where you are lying. You are the gatekeeper tonight, and you have been chasing people down the road for hours. That is not a criticism. It is the most natural thing in the world. A thought comes through the arch, a worry, a memory, a plan for tomorrow that you did not ask for, and it does not feel like a traveler passing. It feels like a summons. It feels like the one thing you must deal with right now, and off you go, half a mile down the road in the dark, and by the time you come back to yourself, you have rehearsed a conversation 4 times, redesigned your entire life, and lost 40 minutes. And when you get back to the gate, you find that nothing was ever going to happen there. It was a man going to see his sister. It is worth noticing how the leaving actually happens, because it is quicker and quieter than people expect. There is no moment of decision. The thought does not knock and wait for an answer. It simply arrives already halfway into a sentence, and then I'll have to tell them that, and you are inside the sentence. You will not catch them at the arch, not most of the time, not even after many years. The practice is entirely about what happens afterward, when you surface. And the good news, the very good news for a tired person at this hour, is that surfacing happens on its own. You do not have to arrange it. Sooner or later, the mind comes up for air, and there you are, back at the gate, with the whole thing available again. The tradition has an old word for staying at the gate. It is sati, usually translated as mindfulness, though the root of it means something closer to remembering. Remembering where you actually are. Not concentration, not effort, not a special state to be achieved. Just the small, ordinary act of coming back to the post. And notice what the gatekeeper did not do, because this is where most people go wrong with it. He did not try to close the gate. He was not in the business of keeping thoughts out. That was his 19-year-old self, exhausted and thin, and no use to anyone. A mind with a closed gate is not a peaceful mind. It is a besieged one. He did not pretend not to see. He greeted every traveler. When a difficult thought comes through tonight, you do not have to look away from it or push it under. Look at it. Nod at it. Ah, this one again. The money one. The one about what I said. Naming it that simply is often enough to keep you in the chair. And he did not go with them. That is the whole practice. And it is not a large thing. It is 100 small returns over and over, without any drama attached to them. So, you will leave. You will be gone before you notice you have gone. That is not a flaw in you. It is simply how minds work. And the old man was gone down that road hundreds of times before he learned to sit. And then, at some point, you will notice that you are half a mile away in the dark, arguing with someone who is asleep in another house. And in that moment, all you do is come back. No commentary, no verdict on how long it took. Just back to the gate, back to the weight of the blanket, back to the breath going in and out on its own. Then you will leave again, 4 breaths later, and you will come back again. And that is not failure repeating itself. That is the practice happening exactly as it happens for everyone who has ever tried it. It also helps to know what the returning is not. It is not a punishment. There is a way of coming back to the breath that is really just self-criticism, wearing the clothes of practice. A small hard voice saying, "There you go again, focus." That voice is the second arrow, and it will keep you awake all night if you let it run the gate. The old man did not scold himself when he came back up the road. He simply sat down and picked up the ledger. It is not a grip either. You are not clamping your attention onto the breath and holding it there by force. Think of the gatekeeper's eyes, open, unhurried, resting on the road. He was not staring at anything. He was just present in an easy, uneffortful way, the way you might sit at a window and watch rain. And it is not something you have to keep doing until sleep arrives. This is not a vigil. If the returning gets vague, if you lose the thread of it entirely and find the whole thing dissolving into something soft and shapeless, then let it dissolve. Falling asleep is not the interruption of the practice tonight. It is the point of it. Let us do a few of those returns now, softly. Feel where your body meets the bed. That is the gate. Nothing more complicated than that. Not a technique, not a posture, not something to be done correctly. Only the plain fact that you are lying down somewhere warm and something is holding you up. Feel the places where the contact is heaviest, the back of the head, the shoulder blades, or the hip, if you are on your side, the heels. Let each of those places give a little more weight than it was giving a moment ago. Feel the breath moving, the cool of it coming in, the warmer, slower going out. Stay for one, just one. And if you have already gone somewhere else, notice that kindly and come back. Feel the blanket. Feel the temperature of the air on your face. Feel the small weight of your own hands. You are not trying to hold the gate all night. You could not, and you do not need to. You are simply here, and then not here, and then here again, and the returning is the whole of it. Let us rest for a moment. There is nowhere to go and no one to follow. The gate is quiet. The travelers can walk past on their own. Let the breath out slowly. Let the shoulders come down once more. They will have crept up again. They always do. Let the hands be open and heavy. 40 years in a chair by an arch, doing almost nothing. And the town felt different when he was gone. That is what staying does, quietly, over a long time. When you are ready, we will go on together. Because there is one kind of traveller that is much harder to let pass, and every one of us knows exactly which one it is. It is not the worry about tomorrow, and it is not the memory. It is the anger, the flare of irritation at your own mind for doing this to you again. That one does not walk past the gate. It comes in and sits down and argues, and you cannot seem to just nod at it and let it go. There is an old story about a boat in the fog that has something to say about that. Let us go down to the river. The river is wide here and slow, and it is early. That hour before the sun comes up properly, when everything is the colour of ash and the mist is lying on the water in long, low banks, so that you can see your own hands on the oars and very little else. The story is an old one. It has been told in Zen halls for a very long time, though it came into that tradition from further back, from an old Chinese book of the Taoist teachers, and it has survived all that travelling because it does something no explanation can do. Let us take our time with it. A man is crossing the river before dawn. He has a boat of his own, small and flat-bottomed, and a load of something under sacking, vegetables perhaps, or clay pots for the market on the far bank. He is not a patient man. He got up in the dark, and he did not sleep well, and he is aware that if he is late, the good positions in the market will be taken. He is rowing hard. The mist thickens toward the middle of the river. He can hear the water against the hull and the creak of the oars in their pins, and somewhere the first birds. He rows, and the far bank is somewhere ahead of him in all that white, and he cannot see it. And he keeps a rhythm going, because a rhythm is the only thing that helps when you cannot see where you are going. And then something strikes his boat, hard enough that he loses an oar stroke, and the boat swings, and a sack shifts against his leg. Out of the whiteness comes the dark shape of another boat, driving into him at an angle, and it is the most infuriating thing that has happened to him in months. He is on his feet at once. He shouts. He calls the other boatman every name he has. He tells him he is blind, that he is a fool, that he has no business on the water, that he will be reported and made to pay for the damage. He shouts about the market and about the hour and about people who do not look where they are going. All the sleeplessness of the night and the pressure of the day come pouring out of him across 10 feet of grey water, and he is shaking with it. And the other boat drifts on into him and turns slowly against his hull and comes to rest there. It is empty. He says the last of his sentence anyway, because it is already out of his mouth, and it goes off across the water and comes back off the far bank, thinner, and then there is nothing at all. It has slipped its rope somewhere upstream in the night. There is no one in it at all. There is a coil of wet line in the bottom and a little water and nothing else. And it has been drifting down with the current for hours in the dark, and it came against him without the slightest intention of doing so. He stands there in his own boat with his mouth open and his heart going hard, and there is nowhere for any of it to go. You can see him, can't you? The rage has to stop somewhere, and there is nobody to receive it. He has been shouting at a thing that was never doing anything to him. And in the quiet after, with the mist and the birds and the two hulls knocking gently together, something in him lets go, not because he has forgiven anyone, but because there is no one to forgive. He looks into it for a long moment, at the coil of wet line and the little water in the bottom, and at the worn place on the gunwale where somebody's hands have rested for years, and he thinks about the person somewhere upstream who will come down to the bank at first light and find their rope hanging empty from the post. He pushes the empty boat away with an oar. He watches it go off into the whiteness, and he sits down and takes up his oars and rows on. And by the time he reaches the far bank, the anger is entirely gone, faster than it has ever gone in his life, and he cannot quite account for it. That is the story, and it is usually told to say something about other people. That the man who was rude to you today may have been an empty boat, carrying something you cannot see, arriving in your morning without any intention toward you at all. But tonight let us use it differently. Tonight, let us say the empty boat is a thought, because you have been shouting across the water for hours, not at anyone else, at yourself, or at something you have been calling yourself. The thoughts keep coming into you out of the mist, and each one knocks against you, and you have been on your feet in the dark, furious. Why do you keep doing this? Why can't you stop? What is wrong with you? Everyone else is asleep. Now look at the thought that woke you at 1:30. Look at it closely. Who sent it? Not you. You would never have chosen it. Nobody lying in the dark, exhausted, decides to summon a memory from 9 years ago about something they said at a wedding. It simply arrived out of the fog on a current that had been carrying it for hours. A bit of the day, a bit of something older, a bit of tiredness in the body, some chemistry you did not order and cannot see. It slipped its rope somewhere upstream. It came against you without the slightest intention. There is no one at the oars. Trace it backward, slowly, if the mind wants something to do. Why did that thought come? Because something today brushed against it. A word, a face, a smell in a corridor. And why did that catch? Because of something years older. And that, because of a house you grew up in, and a language you were given, and a body that was tired at exactly the wrong hour. Follow the line back far enough, and it disappears into the mist entirely. And nowhere along it do you find a person who decided. This is not fatalism, and it is not an excuse. It is simply what is true when you look. Thoughts arise out of conditions, the way mist arises off a river when the air cools. And nobody blames the river for the mist, and nobody stands on the bank at 4 a.m. demanding that it stop. Sit with that for a moment, because it is the loosening of an enormous knot. The mind that will not be quiet is not doing this to you. It is not disobedient. It is not sabotaging your morning. There is no one in the boat, no small hostile version of you steering thoughts at you all night to keep you from sleeping. There is only the current and the mist, and the long line of causes running back behind each thought into a day and a life you did not design. And if there is no one at the oars, then there is no one to shout at, which means the shouting can stop, not because you have won the argument, because the argument has quietly turned out to have only one person in it. Notice too, how much of your exhaustion tonight has come from the shouting and not from the boats. The thoughts themselves are light things. They knock against you and drift off. It is the standing up, the fury, the demand that this stop happening. That is what has your heart going and your jaw tight and your shoulders somewhere up near your ears. Take the shouting out. And what is left is a man sitting in a boat in the mist while things go past him on the water, which is a perfectly restful way to spend an hour before dawn. There is a particular version of this that deserves naming, because it catches almost everyone. It is the moment when you notice you are calmer. The breathing has slowed, the body has gone heavy, sleep is somewhere nearby, and a thought comes through anyway, and the response is instant and furious. Not now. I was almost there. That is standing up in the boat again. And it is the reason so many people surface out of the edge of sleep 3 or 4 times a night and cannot get back down. Not the thought, which was nothing, but the reaction to it, which was a shout across the water. If it happens tonight, and it may, see whether you can simply let the boat knock and pass. You are not almost there and then robbed. You are still here, still warm, still lying down, and nothing has been taken from you at all. Let us take the shouting out then, as far as it will come out tonight. Find, if you can, the place in your body where the frustration has been sitting. For most people, it is one of 3 places: the jaw, the space between the eyebrows, or a tightness across the chest just below the collarbones. See if you can locate yours. You do not have to release it. Just put your attention there, warmly, the way you would put a hand on a dog's back. That tightness has been working all evening on your behalf. It thought it was helping. Somewhere far back, it learned that bracing was how you got through things, and it has been faithfully bracing ever since, including now in a dark room where there is nothing whatever to brace against. You might let it know, without words, that it can stand down for the night, not forever, just until morning. And now let out one breath, slowly, and see if it goes anywhere. It may not. If it stays exactly as it was, let it stay. A tight jaw is also an empty boat, drifting in from a day you did not choose, and it does not require you to fight it either. Say to it, if you like, in the quietest possible voice, nobody is steering this. The thought is not an enemy. The tightness is not an enemy. The wakefulness is not an enemy. Not one of them was sent. There is a second half to the story, which is not always told, and it may be a later addition, but it is a good one, and it belongs here. The same man, some years afterward, is crossing at the same hour, and again something comes out of the mist and strikes his boat. And this time there is a man in it, awake and careless and entirely at fault, who looks up with the expression of someone who knows they are in the wrong and is preparing to be shouted at. And our man says nothing. He fends the other boat off with one hand. He nods. He rows on. And in the quiet after, he notices that whether there was a man in that boat or not made no difference at all to how heavy his own morning was going to be, and that this is a thing he could have understood 20 years earlier in the mist, when the boat was empty. Come back now to your room, to the dark and the sheets and the sound of your own breathing. You have been rowing hard for a long time, not just tonight. Long before this, you learned that a mind is something to be managed, corrected, kept in line, and that if it will not comply, then somebody's failed. That is a heavy way to live inside your own head, and it is very common, and you are probably never taught anything else. And notice how kind this teaching is underneath. It is not asking you to approve of the sleeplessness, or to be grateful for it, or to pretend it is pleasant. It is only removing the person you have been blaming, and it turns out that person was you. There is no one at fault for tonight, not the day, not the mind, not the body, and not you. There is a current, and there is mist, and there are boats coming down out of the dark, and all of it is simply happening. Tonight you may put the oars down for a while. Nothing in this room needs to be steered. The thoughts will come out of the mist for as long as they come, and they will knock against you and drift off downstream, and every single one of them is empty. There is no one in them. There never was. Let the river carry you for a while instead. You have done enough rowing for one night, and the current knows the way down to the sea without any instruction from either of us. Let us rest here for a few breaths. The oars are down. The boat is drifting. There is nothing to solve, and no one to blame, and nowhere to be by morning that cannot be reached by simply lying still. Let the jaw soften. Let the hands stay open. Let the next thought come and knock and go. Feel the whole weight of you being carried by the bed, the way a hull is carried by water. You are not holding yourself up. You have not been holding yourself up all night, though it may have felt that way. Something underneath has been doing it the entire time, without being asked, without being thanked, and it will go on doing it until morning. There is nothing to solve. There is nothing to reach for. There is no one to blame. When you are ready, we will go on together. Because there is still one thing we have not accounted for, the sheer volume of it. Even with the shouting stopped, even with the boats all empty, some nights the traffic on the river is simply relentless. one hull after another out of the fog, and the reason is not mysterious at all. The mind is full. It came to bed full, the way a cup comes to the table already brimming. And there is a very old and very short story about what happens when you try to pour anything into a cup like that. Let us go and sit with a teacher who is about to be quite rude to a professor. The room is small and warm, and there is a low table with a teapot on it. And this is one of the oldest stories in Zen, and one of the shortest, and people have been retelling it for so long that it has worn smooth like a stone in a pocket. A professor came to visit a Japanese master named Nanin. He had come to ask about Zen. That is what he said at the door. And he was, by all accounts, a genuinely learned man, the sort who had read a great deal and thought carefully about all of it. They knelt at the low table, one on either side, and Nanin lifted the pot and began to pour the tea. And the professor began to talk. He talked about what he had studied and what he had concluded. He described the schools he had compared and the passages he had found contradictory. He explained what he thought Zen probably was, and where he suspected it went wrong, and what he had come to have clarified. And he did all of this, we are told, with real enthusiasm, because he had waited a long time for a conversation with someone who could match him. Nanin went on pouring. He was, we are told, entirely attentive, nodding, listening, watching the tea go into the cup and not into the professor's argument, in no hurry to interrupt a man who had come a long way to speak. The steam came up between them. Somewhere outside there would have been the ordinary sounds of a temple afternoon, and none of it made its way into the professor's account of what Zen was. The tea reached the top of the professor's cup, and Nanin kept pouring, and the tea went over the rim and across the saucer and out onto the table and began to run toward the edge, and still he poured. The professor watched this for as long as anyone could bear it, and then said, "Stop, it's full. No more will go in." And Nanin set down the pot and said, "Like this cup, you are full of your own opinions and speculations. How can I show you Zen unless you first empty your cup?" That is the whole story. It has survived 1,200 years on the strength of one small domestic accident and a sentence that lands like a slap, and it is usually told to say something about intellectual arrogance. The scholar who cannot learn because he already knows. But tonight it says something else, something much gentler and much more useful to a person lying awake at this hour. You came to bed with a full cup. That is all. Not arrogant, not proud, not doing anything wrong, simply full. You arrived at the pillow carrying the entire day, every conversation still half finished in you, every open question, every small unresolved thing, and then you lay down and asked for rest to be poured in on top of all of it. And rest, like tea, does not go into a full cup. It runs down the sides and across the table and does you no good at all. This is worth understanding properly because it explains something that has probably confused you for years. Why sleep is so much harder on the nights when you most need it. The full days are the ones that end with the fullest cup. The mind that will not stop tonight is not malfunctioning. It is holding, faithfully and with enormous effort, everything you handed it since morning, because nobody ever told it that it could put any of it down. And notice what filling a cup actually costs. The professor was not resting in that room. He was performing, holding his whole library in his head, keeping it ordered, ready to defend it. That is work. and he had been doing it so long that he had stopped noticing it as work. You have been doing the same thing since you lay down, holding the day in place, keeping the shape of tomorrow clear so it does not get away from you, rehearsing, checking, making sure nothing is dropped. It feels like thinking, but the body knows better. The body has been braced under it for hours, which is why your shoulders are where they are and why your jaw has to be reminded 4 times a night to let go. Nobody can pour rest into that. Not a technique, not a voice in the dark, not the best night's sleep in the world. The cup has to come down first. There is a second teaching folded inside this one, and it is the heart of Zen, and it is called not knowing. The professor's cup was full of answers. Ours at 1 in the morning is usually full of questions, which is the same problem in a different coat. What will I say to them? How will I manage next month? What did that mean? What is going to happen? All night the mind reaches for a conclusion, because a conclusion feels like it would let us rest. But you have noticed, surely, that it never does. Reach a conclusion at 2 in the morning, and within 4 minutes, the mind has found the flaw in it and started again. There is no answer good enough to end the search, because the searching is not really looking for an answer. It is looking for the feeling of safety, and answers do not carry that. Not knowing is the other way. It is putting the cup down with nothing in it, and finding, to your surprise, that this is restful, that you are permitted to lie here at this hour without knowing how any of it turns out. You do not have to solve your life before you are allowed to sleep. You do not have to know. Not knowing is not a gap that needs filling. Tonight it is simply the shape of a mind at rest. Children know this. Watch a child fall asleep in the back of a car. No plan for tomorrow, no theory about the day, no verdict on how the evening went. Just gone, mid-sentence, with an entirely empty cup. We were all fluent in this once. Nothing was taken away from us. We simply learned over years that holding everything was the responsible thing to do, and nobody ever came along afterward to tell us we could stop at night. You may stop at night. Nothing will fall. The things you are holding are not being held up by your attention, and they will still be exactly where they are when the light comes. No better and no worse for the hours you spent guarding them. Let us tell one more small story, an ordinary one, about a house. There was a woman who kept a house on a narrow street in a market town, with sons and daughters-in-law and eventually grandchildren in it. And by the time she was old, there were 9 people under that roof, and she was the axis they all turned on. She had one habit that the family regarded as a personal quirk and never once questioned, in the way that families do. By the door, on the wall of the passage, there was a shelf. It was nothing much. A plank on 2 brackets, dark with age. And every evening when the work was done and the last of the dishes were away, she would stop in the passage, in front of that shelf, for about as long as it takes to breathe 3 times. She was not doing anything visible. She would stand there and lay one hand flat on the wood, and then go through to sit by the fire. Her granddaughter asked her about it once, when she was old enough to be curious and young enough to still ask things directly. "I put it there," the old woman said. "Put what there?" "Whatever I am still carrying." She thought about it. The letter from your uncle, the thing the neighbor said about your mother, the money for the roof. It is all on that shelf now. The granddaughter looked at the shelf, which had a bowl of buttons on it and a stub of candle and nothing else. Does it work? Not always, said the old woman. But it is on the shelf, whether or not I feel better about it. And I know where it is. I have not thrown anything away. That would be foolish, and I would only spend the evening looking for it. It will all be there in the morning when I come down, and I will pick up whatever still needs picking up. The granddaughter said, and if you can't stop thinking about it anyway? Then I am thinking about something on a shelf in the passage, said the old woman, and I am sitting by the fire, which is not the same as carrying it about the house. The granddaughter tried it herself, years later, in a different town and a much harder season of her life, and she found that the difficult part was not the setting down. The difficult part was walking away from the shelf. She would put a thing there and get 4 steps down the passage and go back for it, the way you go back to check a door. She did it anyway. 4 steps, back, put it down again. 4 steps, back. And then one evening she got all the way to the fire and sat down and noticed halfway through the evening that she had left it in the passage and had not missed it. She lived a long time. She was not a serene woman. She had a sharp tongue and strong opinions about her neighbours, and she worried about her children until the last week of her life. But she slept every night in a house with 9 people in it and no money to speak of, and her family used to say it was because she had a hard head and did not feel things. It was the shelf. 9 people, a leaking roof, and a plank on 2 brackets in a dark passage, and she slept. Nobody in that family ever learned what she did there, except the one granddaughter, who told it to her own children as a story about their eccentric great-grandmother, and only understood it herself somewhere in her 50s. Come back now to your own room, and the dark, and the weight of the blankets. You do not have a shelf in the passage. You have a bed and a ceiling you cannot see, and about 6 hours until the alarm. But you can do what she did, and it costs nothing, and it does not require you to feel any better. Take whatever you are still holding, and you know exactly what it is. It is the thing that has been circling since you lay down, and set it somewhere, not away, not gone, on a shelf at the edge of the room, near the door. Somewhere it will still be in the morning. You are not throwing it out. You are not deciding it doesn't matter. You are not promising to have solved it by daylight. You are only saying, not carried and not now. And if there are several, there usually are, put them all there, one at a time, unhurriedly. The thing about tomorrow, the thing about the person, the thing about money, which is on everyone's shelf, the old one that has been on every shelf you have ever had. There is room. Shelves in the dark are very large. And if it comes back 3 minutes from now, as it will, you do not have to be disappointed. You simply put it back on the shelf. The old woman did that for 60 years. She did not get better at it particularly. She just kept doing it every evening, 3 breaths in a dark passage, and it was enough. And notice, this is the part people miss, that she did not wait to feel calm before she put things on the shelf. She put them there while still worried, still irritated, still turning something over. The setting down came first. The easing, when it came at all, came later, and often not until the next day, and she did not require it in order to go and sit by the fire. Do that tonight. Do not wait to feel peaceful before you put the day down. Peaceful is not the entry price. Put it down badly, unconvincingly, while still thinking about it. That counts. Let the cup be empty for a while, not filled with peace, not filled with the right thoughts, not filled with a better attitude, just empty, the way a cup is empty on a shelf overnight, waiting for nothing in particular. You do not need to know how tomorrow goes. You do not need to know how any of it resolves. You do not need to know why the mind was loud tonight, or whether it will be loud again, or what it means about you. There is no examination in the morning. Not knowing is allowed, and at this hour, not knowing is rest. Let us do it now, in the simplest way, with the hands. Notice your hands wherever they are. Notice whether they are quite as loose as you thought. Let the fingers uncurl a little more. Let the palms be open and soft, facing wherever they face. That is the gesture. 2 open hands in the dark, holding nothing. Let the out-breath be long and unmanaged. Let the shoulders drop once more. Let the face be soft. The brow, the eyelids, the small muscles at the corners of the mouth that have been holding a slight expression all evening for no one. Empty cup. Open hands. Nothing to know. Let us pause here for a few breaths. There is nothing to work out. There is nothing to carry. Let your hands be empty and open. Let the whole day sit on the shelf in the passage, where you can find it if you truly want it, which you will not. When you are ready, we will go on together. Because for some of us, on some nights, even setting things down is one more thing to do. The mind is too loud to hear a story about a shelf, let alone use one. And on those nights, the tradition points somewhere much simpler and much lower down than the mind. It points to the sound of the rain on the roof. Let us go and listen to it. There is a kind of night where none of it works. You have heard the stories and you understand them, and somewhere under all of it you even agree. And the mind goes on anyway, loud and fast, and the shelf in the passage is nowhere to be found, and the empty boats are coming through so quickly that there is no gap between them. Every teaching becomes one more thing you are failing at. If tonight is that night, put the teachings down too, all of them. They are also things to hold. There is no requirement to have understood anything said in the last 2 hours. There is no requirement to have felt calm at any point. You are allowed to have listened to all of it and still be lying here wide awake and unconvinced. And nothing about that is a failure, not of yours and not of the teaching. And come down out of the mind altogether to somewhere much lower and much older, which has been quietly available the entire time. Come down for a while into the ears. Listen. Right now, wherever you are. What is the room doing? There will be something. The small tick of a house cooling. Traffic a long way off. A fridge. Wind at a window. Someone breathing beside you. If you are lucky, rain. Whatever it is not asking anything of you. It has no opinion about your day and no plan for your morning. It is simply the room, going on being a room at 3 a.m, as rooms do. That sound is happening in the present moment, which is a thing your thoughts almost never do. Every thought you have had tonight has been about a moment that is not this one, an hour that has gone or an hour that has not arrived. That is what thinking is largely for, but sound does not work that way. Sound is always now. You cannot hear yesterday. This is why every contemplative tradition worth the name eventually stops talking and points at something ordinary. The breath, the feet, the sound of rain. Not because the senses are holy, but because they are the only door that is always unlocked. However loud the mind is, however far gone the night, you can still hear the room. That door does not close. Let us go somewhere and listen for a while. A woman lay awake in a stone house at the end of a hard year. It had been the kind of year that does not have one large disaster in it, which is somehow worse. A long accumulation of ordinary difficulty, illness in the family that did not resolve, work that had turned unkind, a friendship that had thinned out over months without either of them naming it. She was not in crisis. She was simply worn through, in the way that people are worn through in their 40s, quietly and without anyone noticing. And she had not been sleeping. For weeks she had gone up to bed at a reasonable hour and lain there in the dark with her mind going like a mill. And the not sleeping had become a thing in itself, worse than any of the things she was not sleeping about. That night she lay down and it began again immediately. The conversation with her sister, the letter she had not answered, the calculation of how tired she would be, and the calculation again. She turned over onto her other side. She turned back again a few minutes later. She did all the things she had read about. She counted, she breathed. She told herself firmly that this was unhelpful, and the mill went on turning because it does not take instruction. And then, somewhere around the middle of the night, when she had given up on the whole enterprise and was simply lying there with her eyes open in the dark, it began to rain. It came in slowly, the way it does. A few taps on the roof tiles above her head, then a scatter, then a change in the whole quality of the darkness as it settled into a steady fall. She lay and listened because there was nothing else to do, and she began, without meaning to notice how many rains there were. There was the rain on the tiles directly overhead, which was fine and quick and everywhere at once. There was the deeper, rounder sound where it fell into the water butt below the window, filling it, the note of it climbing very slowly over the hours as the level rose. There was the gutter, which had a leak at the joint, and dripped with a slower rhythm than everything else, and occasionally missed one. There was the soft, heavy sound in the leaves of the tree at the corner of the house, and the different sound where the same tree's water fell onto the flagstones beneath it. There was the road hissing whenever anything went past, which was almost never. None of it was in time with any of the rest. She noticed that. There were 6 or 7 rhythms going at once, and they drifted in and out of each other and never resolved. And it was completely disorganized, and it was one of the most beautiful things she had ever heard. She thought, briefly, about how much rain must be falling on the whole valley to make that much sound on one small roof. And then she stopped thinking about that too, and just listened. At some point she realized she had stopped thinking about her sister. She did not congratulate herself, because that would have ended it. She just went on listening. The gutter dripped and missed and dripped. The water butt note climbed a half step over an hour. Somewhere far off there was a car, and then there was not. Her body, meanwhile, had done something on its own while she was not supervising it. Her jaw had come apart. Her hands, which had been closed, were open on the blanket. The long muscles either side of her spine, which had been quietly bracing for weeks, had let go into the mattress, and she felt heavier than she had felt in a very long time, and the heaviness was not unpleasant. There was a moment, she remembered this afterward, when she thought quite clearly, I am not asleep and I am resting. And that was a new idea to her. It had not previously occurred to her that those two things could be separated, that the whole grinding project of the last month had been aimed at the wrong target, That rest was available immediately, tonight, without waiting for sleep to grant permission. She thought about the water butt filling, and how in the morning it would be full, and the garden would be soaked, and the ground would take weeks to dry, and how none of that required anyone to do anything except let it happen. She never knew when she went under. That is the ordinary way of it. There was rain, and the gutter, and the slowly rising note of the water butt, and then it was grey light, and the birds had started, and the rain had stopped some time in the night without her hearing it end. In the morning she went down and stood in the doorway with a cup of something hot and looked at the wet garden and the full water butt, and she did not think about the night at all until much later in the week, when she was doing something else entirely, and it came back to her. The gutter, the 6 rhythms, the heaviness in her back, and she understood that something had been shown to her. She slept badly for years afterward, on and off. Nothing was cured, but she had learned the door, and she used it, the sound of the room, whatever the room was doing, and it never once failed to be there, even on the nights when it did not lead to sleep. Come back now to your own room, and to whatever your room is doing at this hour. Perhaps there is rain where you are. Perhaps there is only the hum of a building and a road that has gone quiet. Whatever it is, it will do. The woman's rain was not special. It was only what her night happened to be making that evening, and yours is making something too. Let us go through that door together, slowly, and stay a while. There is nothing to achieve in the next few minutes. Begin with the sounds furthest away. Whatever is happening outside, a road, wind, an animal, a distant machine, or a silence so complete it has its own faint hum. Do not name it if you can help it. Just let it arrive. Now bring the listening closer into the building. The small noises a structure makes at night. Water in a pipe somewhere. A floor easing. The particular sound of a room with a person in it. And now closer still to the sound of your own breathing. Not the idea of it. The actual small sound of air moving in and out, which you can hear if you go quiet enough, and which has been the most constant sound of your entire life. Stay there for a few breaths. If the mind wanders off, it wanders off. The sounds do not go anywhere. You can come back whenever you happen to notice, and you may find, if you stay a little longer, that the listening loosens by itself, that you are no longer picking out one sound and then another, but simply hearing everything at once, near and far together, without sorting any of it. Let that happen if it happens. It is the ears doing what the mind did with the clouds on the hillside. Shapes, and then no shapes, and then only the wide thing they were moving through. And now let the listening spread out into feeling, which is the same door in a different wall. Feel the temperature of the air on your face, and how it differs from the warmth under the blanket. Feel the exact places where your body is being held, the pillow under the side of your head, the weight of your upper arm, your hip, your knees resting against each other or apart, the heels or the outside edges of your feet. Feel the fabric. There is a texture against your skin right now that you have not noticed once tonight, and it has been there for hours. The weight of the blanket over your legs, the cool part of the pillow, and the warm part where your head has been. Let the attention go down through the whole length of you now, unhurried, the way water finds its way down a hillside. The crown of the head and the scalp, which is holding more than you would think. The forehead wide and cool. The eyes heavy in their sockets, and the small, tired muscles all around them letting go. The cheeks, the jaw once more, coming apart very slightly, the neck and the throat, the shoulders dropping, the upper arms, the elbows, the forearms, the hands, 10 fingers doing nothing at all, the chest rising and falling, the belly soft, the lower back spreading, the hips giving their whole weight down, the thighs heavy, the knees unlocked, the calves, the ankles, the feet and the soles of the feet, which carried you through the entire day and have not been thought about once since. Feel the small movement of your ribs. That is the only thing in you that has to keep moving, and it does it by itself, without your help, and it will go on all night whether you are awake or not. None of this is a technique for producing sleep. Do not use it as one. The moment it becomes a method for getting somewhere, the whole thing tightens, and we are back at the stirred water. Notice, as we go, that there is no way to do this incorrectly. You cannot listen wrongly. You cannot feel the weight of your own arm inaccurately. This is the one place in your whole night where the idea of getting it right does not apply at all, and that alone is a kind of relief. And notice how much smaller the world becomes down here. All evening the mind has been running an enormous operation. Next month, last year, other people's opinions, versions of yourself that do not exist yet. Down here there is a room, a body, a few sounds, and the next breath. That is the entire territory. Everything else was constructed, and it can be put down for the night, and it will rebuild itself in the morning without any effort from you. It is just this. The room is here, the body is here, and both of them are entirely uninterested in tomorrow. When the mind gets loud, they are still here. When the mind gets quiet, they are still here. They are the ground floor of the house, and you can always go down to it. And here is the thing the woman found, which is worth carrying with you. You can rest without sleeping. If sleep does not come tonight, you have not failed at the night. Being warm and still in the dark, listening to a room, is genuine rest, and your body knows how to take it. Sleep, when it comes, will come the way it always does, without announcement, in the middle of something else, while you are busy listening to a gutter drip and miss and drip. So if you are still awake in an hour, you may lie here exactly like this, listening to the room, feeling the bed hold you, and it will still be worth the hour. That is not a consolation prize. That is what the night is actually for. Let us rest here for a while now, in the sound and the weight. Nothing to solve, nothing to reach for. The rain, or whatever your room has instead of rain, going on without you. When you are ready, we will go on together, quietly, because there is one last question waiting, and it has been standing at the back of everything we have said tonight, patiently, for hours. We have talked about the thinking. We have talked about watching the thinking and letting it settle and not shouting at it and listening past it to the room. But who is listening? Let us go and look for them. It is the strangest search in the world, and it ends in the deepest rest there is. There is an old story from the very beginnings of Zen in China, and it is barely a story at all. 4 or 5 sentences, most of them silence. A man came to a teacher and asked for help. He had been practicing a long time, and he was in real distress, and what he said was something like this: "My mind is not at peace. Please put it at rest for me." And the teacher said, "Bring me your mind, and I will set it at rest." The man went away and looked. Think about how odd that is, and how easily he might have refused. He had come with a real problem, and he had been handed something that sounds almost like a joke, and instead of arguing, he simply went and did it. He went off somewhere quiet and turned his attention around and hunted through himself for the thing that was suffering. We are not told how long he looked. In some tellings it is a night, in others much longer, and it hardly matters, because the looking is the whole thing, and the answer at the end is always the same. He came back and said, "I have searched for it, and I cannot find it." And the teacher said, quite simply, "There, I have set it at rest for you." That is the end of the story. It has been told for 1500 years, and it can seem, at first hearing, like a trick. A clever teacher wrong-footing an earnest student. It is not. It is an invitation to do the strangest and most restful search there is, and you can do it tonight, lying exactly where you are, without moving. Here it is. All evening, something has been unquiet. You've been calling it my mind, and it has felt like a thing, a churning object somewhere behind your eyes that will not settle down and that you are responsible for. So look for it, not intellectually. Actually look, the way you would look for a sound in a house. Where is it? Is the restlessness in your chest? Go and feel there. There is warmth, perhaps, and the movement of breath, and maybe some tightness. But that is a sensation, and sensations are not the thinker. Something is aware of the sensation. So the searcher is not there. Is it behind the eyes? Go and look. There is a kind of pressure or busyness there, most likely, and if you look closely at it, it is also a sensation, also not the one looking. Is it in the thoughts themselves? Wait for the next one, and look at it while it is here, and notice that it is already going. There is nothing to hold. You cannot catch a thought and turn it over and inspect it. By the time you turn toward it, it has gone, and the one you are now inspecting is a different one entirely. So where is the mind that will not be quiet? Look for the one who is worried. Not the worry, the one, the person who is having a difficult night. Turn around, so to speak, and look directly at them. And what you find when you look is not a person. There is a looking. There is awareness, wide and quiet, and things happening in it. A room, a body, a series of thoughts arriving and leaving. And nowhere in all of that is there a small separate someone sitting in a chair being kept awake. The tradition calls this anatta, which is usually translated as not self, and it is the teaching people most often get frightened by. So let's be careful and plain about it. It does not mean you do not exist. Obviously, you exist. You are lying in a bed, breathing, listening to a voice. It means something much narrower and much kinder. That when you look for a fixed, solid, separate owner behind all this experience, you do not find one. You find the experience itself happening. And if that sounds abstract, notice what it does to tonight. If there is no fixed someone in there, then there is no one who is failing at sleeping. There is no one who is bad at quieting their mind. There is no defective person lying here at 3 a.m. with a broken instrument. There is a body that is tired. There is a room. There is thinking happening the way weather happens, because of 100 causes running back into the day and the year and the life. And there is awareness in which all of it is appearing, and which is not tired and not anxious, and has not been struggling with anything at all tonight. The struggle needed too, a self, and a mind that would not obey it. Look for the first one, and the argument quietly loses a participant. That is what the teacher meant. He did not fix the man's mind. He sent him to look for the one who was suffering, and the looking was the medicine. And when he came back empty-handed, there was nothing left to fix. There is a kind of story the tradition tells for this, and let us tell one, because the idea goes down more easily in a story than in an explanation. There was a man who lived in a town at the mouth of a river, and one autumn, for no reason he could ever properly explain, he decided to go and find where the river began. It was a real river. Boats used it. The whole town drank from it and washed in it and argued about it, and it had a name, and the name was on maps, and it had been there longer than anyone could remember. So there must, he reasoned, be a place where it started. A spring under a rock somewhere high up, a first cold mouthful coming out of the hillside. He wanted to stand there and put his hand in it. He went up in the early autumn with a blanket and a pot and a good pair of boots. For the first 3 days it was simple. The river was wide and obvious, and he walked beside it, and the valley narrowed, and the water got quicker and shallower and colder. Then it forked. 2 streams of almost exactly the same size came down out of 2 different valleys, and he stood between them for a long time, and finally chose the left one because it was slightly louder. 2 days later it forked again, and then again, and the streams became smaller and less certain, and some of them dried to a trickle of stones, and then reappeared further up, and one of them vanished under a bank of moss and came out 20 paces higher, as though nothing had happened. By the second week, he was up on the open hillside, where there was no path, and the thing he had been following was no longer a stream at all. It was a wet place. The whole slope was seeping. Water was coming out of the ground everywhere he stood, in 100 small mouths under the grass, none of them large enough to be called anything, and when he knelt down and put his ear near the ground, he could hear it moving under the turf in every direction. He walked about up there for 2 more days looking for the source, and there was no source. There was no rock with water coming out of it. There was no first cold mouthful. There was nowhere at all he could have put his hand and said, "Here, this is where it begins." There was rain that had fallen for 10,000 years. There was snow melting somewhere above him. There was the shape of the rock, which sent the water this way and not that way. There was moss holding it, and there was a whole hillside quietly leaking, and out of all of that, further down, entirely reliably, a river. He sat down on a stone with his boots wet through, and he laughed, and he could not have told you exactly why. It was something to do with having walked for 2 weeks toward a thing that was not there, and finding that the walk had been pleasant, and that the river below him was going on regardless. And when he came home, he still drank from that river, and the boat still used it, and he still called it by its name. Nothing had been taken away. It was simply that he had gone looking for the one thing behind it all, and there was no one thing, and the river had not minded in the slightest. It went on running through the town exactly as it always had. That is what happens when you look for the self. You do not find a lie, and you do not find an emptiness that swallows everything. You find a hillside, sensations and thoughts and memory, and the body's weather, and habits laid down so long ago that they feel like bedrock. All of it seeping and joining and running together, and out of it, entirely reliably, a life. A person with a name that is on documents, who has a history and people who love them and a bed they are lying in right now. Nothing is taken away. There is just no one at the source, because there is no source, and it never needed one. And what a relief that is at this hour, if you let it be. Because the thing that has been exhausting you tonight is not the thinking. It is the sense of a small, solid someone in the middle of it who is responsible for all of this and is not managing it well. Go and look for them, and you find a hillside in the dark, quietly seeping, doing what hillsides do. Let us do it slowly now, together and gently. This is not a test, and there is no answer you are supposed to arrive at. Notice the breath moving, just that, for a moment. Now ask softly, without any urgency, who is noticing this? Do not answer with a word. Do not say me and move on. That is a reflex, not a looking. Just turn the attention around, the way you would turn to see who has come into a room behind you. What is actually there? Most likely, a kind of open space with things happening in it, the sound of the room, the weight of the body, a thought about the question itself, and no one standing there, no face, no small commander, just the awareness which has no edges you can find and no location you can point at. Rest there for a moment, if it is restful, and if it is not, if it feels strange, or slightly vertiginous, or simply like nothing at all, then let the whole inquiry go and come straight back to the ordinary and reliable things. The weight of the blanket, the sound outside, the breath going in and out. Nothing tonight requires you to have any particular experience. This teaching has been available for 25 centuries, and it will still be there next week. But if it did land, even for a second, notice what came with it. Relief. That is what people report again and again. Not fear, but relief. Because the one who has been holding everything together all night, the one who has been managing and monitoring and taking responsibility for the behavior of your own mind, turns out to be a job that nobody is actually doing. And when that is seen, even briefly, the whole heavy apparatus of self-management can set itself down for a while. The thoughts may go on, they usually do, but they go on without an owner, and that changes everything about how heavy they are. A thought with no one in it is only a passing arrangement of sound and image. It is the empty boat again, seen from the inside this time. Come back now to the room, and the bed, and the dark. There is no one you have to be tonight, and nothing you have to become before morning. That is worth saying again slowly, because it is the thing that all of this has been walking toward for hours. There is no one you have to be tonight, not the person who sleeps well, not the person who understood the teaching, not the calm version of yourself you are hoping to become by the end of this recording. The breathing goes on. The room goes on being a room. The night goes on wide and unhurried and entirely without opinion, and you are not separate from any of it. You are a part of it that got tired and lay down. Notice, too, that this is not something you have to maintain. You could not hold on to it if you tried, and trying would only be the old grasping in a new costume. It is simply a thing that is true, whether it is being noticed or not. As true when you are irritated tomorrow afternoon as it is now. So nothing has to be kept. You looked, and you did not find the one who is suffering. And now you may let even that go and lie here as an ordinary tired person in an ordinary dark room. Let us rest here for a while. Nothing to be, no one to manage. The awareness in which this whole evening has been happening, asks nothing from you and never has. Let the breath be soft. Let the body be heavy. Let the question go, and the answer, and the one who was asking. Let the shoulders come down one more time. Let the hands lie open. Let the whole hillside seep quietly in the dark, as it has done all your life, without supervision. There is nothing to solve. There is nothing to reach for. There is no one who needs to do this well. When you are ready, we will go on together, one last time, because we have come a long way tonight, from the young man fighting his own mind in a mountain hall to this, the search that finds no one. And there is one more thing to do, and it is the easiest thing of all. It is late now. In a house at the end of an evening, someone goes from room to room, and one by one the lamps go out. Let us walk through that house together and put out the last of the lights. It is a large old house on the edge of a town, and there has been a gathering in it, a wedding, as it happens, though it could have been anything. A funeral, a harvest, a birthday. One of those days a family builds a house around. Everyone has gone up. The guests who were staying have been found beds, and the ones who are not staying went off down the lane an hour ago with lanterns, and the last of the singing stopped somewhere around midnight. One person is still awake. An aunt, let us say, the sort of aunt every family has, who arrives 2 days early and leaves 2 days late and knows where everything is kept. She is doing the last walk through the house, not tidying. It is far too late for tidying, and she has been on her feet since 6, just going round, the way someone does at the end of a long day, seeing that the doors are shut and the fires are safe, and everyone who should be under a roof is under one. She starts in the kitchen, where the fire has burned down to a bed of orange under grey ash. She banks it for the morning, closing the ash over it with a small iron shovel, and the room goes darker by half. There are dishes stacked that will not be dealt with tonight, and a bowl of something covered with a cloth, and the whole warm, sour, sweet smell of a kitchen at the end of a feast. She looks at the dishes for a moment. She leaves them. On the table there is a half-drunk glass of something, and a plate with one small cake left on it, and she eats the cake, standing up, in the dark, which is the sort of thing you can do at that hour when there is no one to see. She takes the lamp through into the long room where they ate. There are chairs pushed back at every angle, the way chairs are left by people who got up laughing. Someone's shawl over a chair back. A glass on the window sill where a glass should never be. Under the table, one shoe, which she does not investigate. She could tidy this. She stands there with the lamp and feels the pull of it, the old familiar pull of leaving things right. And then she puts the lamp on the table and blows out the candle in the wall bracket instead, and the far end of the room goes into the dark, and the chairs are still at their angles, and the shoe is still under the table, and none of it has gone anywhere. It is simply no longer being looked at. That is the whole of tonight, in one small movement, and she does not know she's teaching anyone anything. She goes down the passage. There is a lamp on a bracket by the stairs, and she turns it down until the flame is a small blue thing, and then nothing, and the passage becomes the shape of a passage rather than a passage, dark and familiar, and she goes up by feel because she has gone up those stairs for 40 years. At the top there is a landing with 3 doors. Behind one of them, someone is snoring already. Behind another, 2 of the children, who were not going to sleep at all, are asleep sideways across a bed with their shoes still on, and she does not wake them, because you do not wake children to make them more comfortable. She stands on the landing for a moment with the lamp held low, and lets herself feel how the day sits in the house now that it is over. It was, on the whole, a good day. There was one moment at the table that was not, a sentence from her brother that landed wrong, and a silence afterward that everyone worked to fill. And she notices that it is still there in her, small and sharp, the way such things are. She notices, too, that she could take it upstairs with her and lie down with it and turn it over until 4 in the morning, and that she has done exactly that on other nights of her life, and that it has never once improved anything. So she leaves it where it happened, down there in the long room, among the chairs at their angles. She goes to the window at the end of the landing. There is nothing out there but the dark shape of the hill and a wet field, and further off, one light in another house where somebody else is awake. And she thinks about them for a second, whoever they are, and wishes them well in a vague and generous way, and then stops thinking about them. She turns down the last lamp. The wick goes orange, then red, then nothing at all, and there is that small smell of a snuffed flame, and her eyes take a moment to find the shapes of things by whatever light the sky is giving, and the house, which has been full all day of voices and heat and 40 pairs of feet, becomes what a house is at 2 in the morning, a dark, warm shape with sleeping people in it, holding everything exactly where it was left, waiting quietly for the light to come back. Nothing was cleaned, nothing was finished, nothing was resolved. There was still a glass on the window-sill where a glass should never be. The sentence from her brother was still down in the long room, and the two of them would have to talk about it at some point. And that point was not tonight. The house simply stopped being tended for a few hours and slept, and in the morning there would be dishes and someone would find the shoe. Come back now to your own room and your own bed and the dark that is holding you. You have been going through your house all night, room by room, lamp by lamp, and turning every one of them back up again. That is what the wakefulness has been. Not malice and not weakness, just the old habit of tending. You go into a dark room in yourself, and there is something in there unfinished. The shoe under the table, the dishes, the shawl over the chair, and you cannot help lighting the lamp to look at it. And then another room, and another, and by 3 in the morning the whole house is blazing, and every unresolved thing you own is lit up and being examined, and you are more awake than you were at 10 o'clock. And notice which rooms you have been lighting. It is never the good ones. Nobody lies awake at 3 in the morning going over the kind things someone said, or the work that went well, or the afternoon that was simply pleasant. The lamp goes straight to the unfinished, the unresolved, the thing that might still go wrong, because somewhere long ago you learned that watching a thing is a way of keeping it safe. It is not. It never was. Nothing in your life has ever been made safer by being looked at in the dark at 3 in the morning. Tonight you may leave the rooms dark, all of them. The room with tomorrow in it. The room with a conversation you did not handle well. The room with money, and the room with the person you are worried about, and the small cold room at the back that you do not go into often, and that has been open all evening. Not tidy them, not solve them, not decide about them, just not look for a few hours. Everything in there will still be exactly where it is when the light comes back. Nothing gets lost in the dark. That is the thing about a house. It holds what it holds, whether you are looking or not. And here is the last thing, the quiet one, that all of this has been walking toward. You already know how to do this. You have fallen asleep something like 11,000 nights in your life, and every single one of them required exactly what we have been circling all evening. The letting go of control, the release of the watcher, the surrender of the whole project of managing yourself. You have done it more times than you can count. You did it as a child in the back of a car, and as an adult in an armchair when you meant to read. Think about how completely you have surrendered night after night, without ceremony. You have lain down in a dark room and released your grip on absolutely everything. Your plans, your worries, your name, your sense of where you are and what year it is, and handed the whole of yourself over to several unconscious hours you cannot supervise, and then done it again the following night, and the one after that. There is no deeper letting go available to a human being, and you have already performed it thousands of times, most of them without noticing. Sleep is not a skill you lack. It is the one thing every human being on earth is expert at, and the only reason it seems difficult tonight is that you have been trying to arrange it, and it is the one thing that cannot be arranged, only allowed. And the paradox in that is worth resting on rather than solving. Every night of your life, sleep has arrived while you are not looking, in the middle of a thought, halfway through a summoned it, which means the only thing that has ever been required of you is to stop standing in the doorway, waiting for it. So there is nothing left to do. There never was. The teachings tonight were not instructions. They were company, so that the hours would pass with a voice in them. The mind may still be moving. Let it move. The mud is settling at the bottom of the glass whether you approve or not. The clouds are crossing a sky that does not mind. The boats are empty. The day is on the shelf in the passage, and the one who has been worrying about all of it was never found, though we did look. Let us take a few slow breaths together before we close, with nothing to do in them at all. Feel the weight of your head on the pillow and how completely it is being held. Feel the shoulders and let them come down one last time. Feel the arms, heavy, the hands open or closed, wherever they have fallen, the long weight of the legs, the feet. Feel the breath moving in and out without being managed, a little longer on the way out, if that is what it wants. And let the room be dark around you, and let the rooms behind it stay dark too. Let us close the evening here. We have come a long way together tonight. There was a young man in a mountain hall who fought his own mind for 2 months and learned, in the end, only to stop bolting the door. There was a weaver who broke a thread and mended it in the length of 2 breaths. There were 2 travellers by a churn stream in dry country, and a girl on a hillside who forgot to name the clouds, and an old man who kept a gate for 40 years by staying in his chair. There was a man in the fog who shouted at an empty boat. There was a professor with an overflowing cup, and a grandmother with a shelf in a dark passage, and a woman who listened to rain fall 6 different ways onto one small house, and a man who walked 2 weeks up a river and found no source at all, only a hillside quietly seeping, and a river running on below regardless. You do not need to remember any of it. If one image stayed, the open hand, the still water, the dark rooms of the house, let that be enough. If nothing stayed, that is also enough. Nothing tonight was a lesson to be carried into tomorrow. It was only a long, slow evening spent in good company, while the thinking gradually lost interest in itself. And if the mind is still turning as this ends, if you are lying here at the close of 3 hours with the same thought you began with, nothing has gone wrong. Some nights the silt takes until dawn. You are not behind, and you have not failed the evening, and there is no one keeping score. There never was anyone keeping score. There is no one you have to be tonight. So let the whole thing go now, teachings and stories and all. Let the breath come and go on its own, the way it has all your life without instruction. Let the body be as heavy as it wants to be. Let the last of the holding, wherever it is, the jaw, the hands, the small place behind the eyes, soften by whatever small amount it can, and if it cannot, let that be allowed too. The lamps are out, one after another, all the way down the passage. The rooms are dark, and nothing in them is lost. Not the shoe under the table, not the shawl on the chair, not one single thing you were afraid you would forget by morning. The house is quiet now, and everyone in it is asleep, and the fire is banked under the ash and will still be warm at first light. The house is holding you, and the night is holding the house, and neither of them needs anything from you before morning. May the grip ease when it can. May the thinking soften and slow and settle by itself. May the mud go quietly down. May you stop needing the night to be different from the way it is. And may the rest that has been waiting for you patiently all these hours be welcomed home at last. Thank you for spending these quiet hours here. It has been good to sit with you in the dark, and there is no need to remember a word of it. Rest now. Everything else can wait for the morning. Sleep well, and good night.